If you're just joining for the afternoon sessions, my name is Allie Trong. I'm the lead content coordinator here at Supply Pike. And then we're joined by Ryan Petty. And Ryan, I mentioned this in an earlier session today. You are a man who wears many hats. So I don't know all the products you touched, but I know that you had some involvement in the Amazon Deductions Navigator. So you have researched that, but you've also been on our OTIF Radar product, as well as Deductions Navigator Kroger, which is what we were talking about literally 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's right. You got them.
Sweet. Well, I'm excited to get into the content. Just to give you a roadmap for everyone on the call, we're going to talk about what Amazon deductions are, how to navigate the platform Vendor Central, and how to dispute the shortage deductions in Vendor Central. Then we'll have some time for questions and discussions, and we may have a lot of questions on this one. So if we don't answer your questions, we're going to go ahead and save them for our deductions office hours, I believe right after this webinar session. So stick around for that if you don't get your question answered. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide.
Should be on the FAQ side.
Oh, maybe I'm lagging for some reason. That's okay. I know what the FAQ slide says, so I'll just go ahead and talk through that. So essentially, if you can take notes and you can take screenshots during this, but we're going to send you these decks, so don't worry, just sit tight and listen along with us, as well as just a quick conversation about submitting questions. If you do the 2 Q&A bubbles, that's the best way for us to see your questions. And the chat is the best for just commenting on what we're talking about. So if you're like, yeah, I dispute a lot of code whatevers, then that's the best place for that. Perfect. And then if you're just joining us, or we've probably said this a million times if you've been with us the whole day, but if you're just joining us, we're Supply Pike. We create cloud-based tools that help CPGs reduce revenue loss. And we'll go ahead and get into Amazon deductions so you can learn a little bit about that. And I'll give it to you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Allie, and good to be back with you all to talk about another retailer and how they sort of claw some of these dollars back to you, and hopefully share some insights that we've learned from talking to many different Amazon suppliers and analyzing data. So to start, we want to talk about, the important question: why are you not getting paid what you are owed? So there's a couple of buckets that we're going to talk about. We'll focus much more on the first bucket, but we'll mention the second one as well. So deductions, of course, the name of the game here. Obviously, this can be resulting from supply chain, billing, defects, and Amazon kind of splits this into sort of 5 focus areas. We'll cover each of these. So starting out, missing invoices. So if they receive goods at their fulfillment center and there is not a related invoice, then of course you're not going to get paid for those goods typically. So obviously, if you don't send the invoice, then that would potentially cause you to not get paid. If the invoice was sent but has not been received, then you may not have payment yet as well. If there was some missing information that's kind of required on the invoice, especially to match up to the actual physical goods that were delivered, if there's not enough data to match the invoice document to those goods, then that can cause a payment to not be made. And then, of course, again, invoices kind of have requirements for what details and data must be sent. And a lot of invoices are sent via EDI. So there's specific requirements for EDI. So can also be rejected for those types of reasons. It's kind of related to this second slide and category of invoices that can't be processed. So obviously this is when you transmit the invoice, but they do not really fully receive that because of errors or inconsistencies. We've listed some reasons that Amazon specifies for why this sort of thing can happen. So if you're missing or have incomplete tax rates, Amazon tax registration numbers, bill to address, and just general EDI sort of missing data, a lot of data in EDI. So if anything is off, it can sort of fail that transaction from getting received. So now we'll talk about sort of the most common issues that we see with Amazon suppliers, starting with shortages. And Amazon, just like other retailers, if you bill for a certain number of units, Amazon perceives that they've only received, fewer than that amount, then they'll create this shortage deduction. They sometimes refer to this as a purchase quantity variance, or PQV, if you like your acronyms. So you may see it listed as that, but it is essentially a shortage scenario. In certain places in Vendor Central and also in help documentation, Amazon may break up the shortage bucket into kind of two categories. Both categories reflect the same concept. Again, there's more billed items or units than what Amazon says they've received. So that is true in either scenario. But there's these two buckets that they call potential and remaining. Potential shortages, it's really all to do with timing. So how old is the shortage? That's generally what is going to determine the category. Whenever Amazon receives your invoice and they have some goods received, or they're still receiving them, basically there's a period of time where they are automatically trying to reconcile or match your goods to any open invoices. So they do this for a certain period of time. With their smart matching process, they actually say 35 days. They'll go out and try to match up to find these goods on these invoices. So if they are calling it a potential shortage, it essentially means that they're still looking for those goods, and they may yet receive them and they may pay you for them. So this is just to give you an idea of what may not be paid at any given time, that they haven't received it yet. The flip side is remaining shortages. And this is where they've really stopped doing their sort of matching or reconciliation process. And it's, they're still shorted goods compared to what they were billed. So they'll sort of move that dollar amount into the remaining shortage bucket. And obviously this could be a valid shortage where, these goods were just legitimately not shipped, or it could be an invalid shortage. So those are kind of these two buckets. If you see them in Vendor Central, in certain spots, they bucket it like this. In other spots, they just throw everything into the shortage list. Okay, so the last sort of area is a long list of various things that you can get sort of nickel and dimed for with Amazon. So I won't go through all of these. You can see some more common ones on here, like late shipping, price variance, that purchase price variance, or PPV. If there's a price discrepancy on what you build versus what they expected to pay. If you build for an item that they didn't receive, all kinds of sort of, compliance type requirements are in this bucket. So a lot of these are here. They generally refer to these as defects, and we'll show you where you can see these in Vendor Central here in just a bit. Okay, so the second category is provisions. And we admittedly haven't heard this issue as much in the Amazon suppliers that we've talked to so far, but we want to at least make sure you have some basic information on this. So basically, these are kind of like holds on your account. So if you have a provision or a hold, then that means Amazon is not paying you at that given time. They update these daily, so you could have some kind of hold today, and then tomorrow they could reverse that hold and release the payment. So these are, a lot of times temporary. We'll go into some of the sort of scenarios where this can happen. So one of them is, you have these various sort of monies owed to Amazon. This could be related to co-ops or promo agreements or rebates, whatever the case is, when you owe Amazon money, Amazon is looking at that category of dollars. And if Amazon also is looking at your own invoices and going to pay them, they try to balance what you owe them versus what they are going to pay. And if they're expected to, be owed more than what they're expected to pay, then they may place that provision to ensure basically that you don't owe them money. They're trying to, basically keep all the dollars and not pay you before they get paid, essentially. So this is kind of the most common one that we've seen in documentation mentioned. And so hopefully that gives you an idea, but they're just forecasting out what they're expecting to pay versus what they're expecting to receive. And if it's at an imbalance, then they may place that provision on your account. Another scenario is kind of specifically related to co-ops or rebates. So if you have, say, a rebate program where you're, giving Amazon 20% off for the next 3 months, after that period, you may be expected to sort of pay that amount back to Amazon. And if you do not in that designated timeline, then that's when they may place a provision on your account and pause payments to you for your own invoices. So anything you kind of agree through that co-op process to pay, you got to pay it, or they may place this kind of hold on your payments. And lastly, there is one more for aged receivables. This seems to be the most rare one out of this group, but this is essentially when one of those invoices becomes aged from an accounting perspective and they place a hold for that reason. Again, this is not often brought up, so I'm going to kind of skip over this one and move on to deductions, but definitely let us know if you have any questions here. Okay, so Vendor Central, we want to at least give you some highlights of where you can go to find out more information about your business with Amazon. To start, we want to clarify Vendor Central versus Seller Central. Today, we're talking specifically about Vendor Central. The main difference between these two is really who you are selling to. So if you are selling your products to Amazon, and Amazon is sort of bulk purchasing and then reselling your goods online, then you're basically an Amazon vendor. Opposite of that, if you are on Amazon.com and you're selling to end consumers, then that's when you use Seller Central and you are a seller on the Amazon marketplace. You can even be fulfilled by Amazon and still ship your goods to Amazon fulfillment centers and still use Seller Central. It just depends on who's basically purchasing the goods, individuals or Amazon in bulk. So we're going to be focusing on that Amazon purchases in bulk. And if you want to become a vendor through Amazon, that's a much different process than it is to get onto Seller Central, which is pretty easy, to actually be a seller compared to being a vendor. All right, so digging into kind of how to access some key points in Vendor Central. So here you've got the URL, login. Just a quick pro tip, if you see that one-time password, second step verification, if you have a computer you use every day, I recommend using that little checkbox of don't require OTP on this browser. And you can, kind of skip that time-consuming process every time you log in. Okay, so once you're logged into Vendor Central, there is a payments tab at the top. There's a lot of data here in Vendor Central, and we are not going to touch the full spectrum of that data, but we're going to focus on this payments tab and several sort of pages within it, including a financial dashboard page. This is where you can go to get a high level view of your overall business with Amazon, how much you billed, how much they paid, etc. Invoices tab, you can see all your invoices as well as search and filter down to specific ones. Financial scorecard, similar name to the first tab, but actually a completely different set of information. This is about your operational performance, your defects, all those, that long list of defects I mentioned earlier can be seen on this financial scorecard. So it's a great place to see all the chargebacks that you're getting from Amazon on that page. And then lastly, want to call out dispute management. This is where you would be disputing and viewing your disputes. And we'll dig a little bit deeper into these pages. So the financial scorecard, I mentioned, if you think of scorecard as your performance, this is where you see all those defects that you have and how much those defects have cost you over time. So you can filter to different periods of time, see the defects in total, see which ones are impacting you the most. And also that potential remaining shortage sort of categories that I talked about earlier can be seen on the left side of that financial scorecard. So hopefully that info about potential versus remaining can give you a little bit of insight into what those numbers mean. Financial dashboard, similarly named, is more high level, just broad strokes of, you know, total billed amounts to Amazon, how much they've paid, how much they've deducted, sort of current balance. So all of that information for high level summary of your financial business with Amazon. Okay. Invoices, another kind of important section. So just as you can imagine, you can see all of your invoices to Amazon within this area. You can also sort of view exception scenarios. So things like rejected invoices, shortages, price discrepancies can all be located on this page. You can look up individual invoices or POs here as well. So a good spot to identify, especially shortages and price discrepancies within this section. And then dispute management. So this page lets you submit, view, and kind of track all of those disputes. You can also export it out. You can see on this page, you've got various filters. So you can filter by date range, filter by dispute type. So this is going to be where you can see specifically shortage, price claim disputes, co-op disputes. All of those can be found in this dispute management page. And you can see their status, how much they've paid back or not. So all of that is in that dispute management page. There's a lot of good help documentation in Vendor Central. If you have the time or need some reading material to go to sleep at night, in their Learn tab, you can got various options. We've highlighted payments here, but there's a lot of articles, even sort of slide presentations of different concepts. So it's a good place to get some, fundamental understanding of various concepts with working with Amazon. And then lastly, one more sort of, reference for help. In the top right corner, you have a support button and you can reach out to them for various reasons. They'll kind of, let you select what type of help you need and then get you to the next step based on that. So good place to kind of escalate if you need to. Okay, and we'll move right into disputing shortage deductions. So again, shortages has been the biggest sort of pain point in the suppliers we've talked to with Amazon, along with compliance and other things. So some notes about their dispute process. About a year ago, they did alter their dispute process, and they do specifically state that shipping documents are no longer required on these disputes. That said, in our experience of talking to many Amazon suppliers, a lot of them are still including the shipping documents when they, in kind of two scenarios. Number one, If they have the shipping documents readily accessible, then they still consider it best practice to improve their chances at winning the dispute. So if you have easy access to the shipping documents, you can still include it on these disputes. And some suppliers believe it is helping them win. In another scenario, if it's a little bit harder to get your shipping documents, something you also might consider is if you have a large shortage deduction that you really believe is invalid and you want to win this dispute, then I would also recommend trying to still attach that shipping document as proof. All that said, if you don't have it and you do want to dispute, you definitely can dispute without it, but it still kind of seems to be a best practice to include that documentation in this initial dispute process. So caveat on shipping documents there. Outside of that, you want to, hopefully have things like shipping dates and the item information that was shipped on a particular order. And just as always, of course, your deduction is, of course, going to be related to the shorted items, not necessarily the entire invoice. So what does that dispute process look? We're going to walk through some of these steps. So number one, Amazon does have some notifications around deductions and disputes. And so you can receive email notifications when there is a deduction. And there's a couple of sort of timelines, and this step kind of highlights it. So before you are notified, there's a couple things going on. Number one, after Amazon receives your invoice, they spend up until that payment due date searching for the goods in their warehouse, trying to match goods to that invoice if they don't have the goods already. So they'll be doing that process until payment is due. And then if you get all the way to 5 days before the payment is due, then they will send a notification to kind of let you know there's a potential shortage here that's going to be issued because they haven't yet found the goods. So it's a good sort of temperature check to give you an idea of what's coming, and especially kind of gives you some notice to investigate that shortage. And especially if it's a bigger one, gives you a chance to gather documentation and kind of be ready to dispute. So on that note, to dispute, you can begin the dispute process once the payment is due. That is the date at which you can actually submit a dispute in Vendor Central, is once that payment is due, then you can dispute these shortages. So how to do that? You would go to that payments invoices section. You can click on review dispute shortages to see all your shortages from the last 30 days and pick out the one that you want to dispute. In this list, which you can see at the bottom in this screenshot, you can have a list of invoices here. And over on the far right, there's an actions button. You would click it, click dispute shortage by ASN, and then it will give you a list of items that are short that you can sort of look at and decide which items you want to dispute. And when you are filling it out, it'll ask you for various bits of data, how many items you're disputing, the shipped product. So, assuming you shipped the product that was ordered, you don't have to fill this out. It'll be defaulted in. But if you did ship maybe a slightly different item, and you'd want to include that item number and the shipped date. Sometimes that's actually handy on these disputes if you split your deliveries into multiple deliveries for one order. So if the items that were short on a second shipment ends up being what's short, then you can list the ship date for that second shipment, and that will help Amazon find those cases in theory to reverse that charge. So ship date can be helpful if you're doing split deliveries. You can attach more documentation to try to win the dispute. I already talked about attaching the shipping documents. Some others you may want to consider the advanced shipping notice. images of your packages in any way. Of course, labels can be helpful just to kind of indicate the quantity that was shipped, and again, shipping documents. And the last set of data that you would fill out on these disputes are title, summary, just kind of basic information about the purpose of that dispute. And once it is submitted, then you wait and hopefully get payback sooner rather than later. So yeah, hopefully that was a good overview of that shortage dispute process.
Yes, that was great, Ryan. And we actually don't have any questions, which is totally fine, because if some of our attendees have some questions here about Amazon, they can always drift them over to the next session, which is all about deductions and answering questions. But just one comment here as we're wrapping up a little bit early. What I really like about Amazon is that everything's kind of in one place, and it seems like their deductions in a lot of ways have overlap in terms of, you can have a little shortage thing here or whatever, but overall the learning is pretty simple and straightforward, instead of having like 60 reason codes for maybe a retailer that we won't name today.
Yeah, there are definitely some good aspects. And I would say, since we don't have any questions, the one thing I'd call out too is, maybe the toughest thing with Amazon shortages is the fact that they receive goods in sort of little groups. So today you'll be short 20 cases and they'll find 5, and tomorrow you'll be short 15. And that can happen, 5, 6, 7 times on the same invoice. So basically you're trying to fight this moving target, and you're trying to keep track of what's been paid back or what has not been paid back. And you never really know if they're going to ultimately pay you for all the cases. So should you just wait or dispute? And that's what makes Amazon a bit tougher, is because they update these shortages over time. So keeping track of that can be a little bit complicated, but yeah, fun stuff.
Yes. We had someone in the chat actually echo your point and say that's the worst part about Amazon. And yeah, I'd have to agree. So we're going to go ahead and skip to the next slide. We'll just share our emails. You can always email us questions, or if you want to get in contact with us about our products, then that's great too. Or you can find us at supplypike.com. We also have lots of resources that are free. And with that, I love that we're tuning off early, and we'll get prepped for the next session. Thank you guys.